Good afternoon. My name is Veronica Givens, and I'm with OPM's Office of Work-Life Leadership and Development, and I'd like to welcome you to Part 2 of our Managers Training, Telework, Managing in a Virtual Environment. We have an ambitious agenda for today. We're going to talk briefly about our training objective, how the nature of work has changed, key myths about telework, the importance of strong leadership skills, performance management basics, managing for results, key manager concerns, and terminating telework, and then we'll end with key takeaways. Part 1 of the training focused on telework basics and the importance of developing a successful telework strategy. The focus of today's training will be on demonstrating how effective performance management can lead to organizational success in a virtual environment. To achieve a high-performance culture, agencies need to empower and encourage supervisors to engage their employees in all stages and aspects of the performance process. OPM calls this concept Performance Management Plus. We will also emphasize the importance of managing for results and not physical presence to ensure organizational success. In expanding our use of terms like virtual environment, we recognize that continued advancements in the area of technology have resulted in new opportunities for the way we perform our work. For example, virtual work is defined as a work arrangement in which an employee performs his or her duties in whole or in part via electronic communication, via telephones, internet tools, computers, etc. It does not require face-to-face contact with coworkers or supervisors. So throughout the training, we will be using terms like virtual environment, virtual work, remote workers, in addition to telework, to expand our understanding of the ways in which work can be performed outside of a traditional office setting. As a reminder, only one of the terms is defined in federal statute, and that's telework. Specifically, the Telework Enhancement Act defines telework as a work flexibility arrangement under which an employee performs the duties and responsibilities of such employee's position and other authorized activities from an approved work site other than the location from which the employee would otherwise work. As we look at the future of work, we recognize that the nature of work and how we perform our jobs has changed from a noun, a place one goes, to a verb, what one does. While the nature of work has changed, the way some managers manage has not changed accordingly. For some managers, the reluctance to allow telework is rooted in uncertainty about managing individual performance. Managers often cite concerns about managing remote workers due to perceived loss of control over efficient business operations. For them, managing people they can't see is a scary proposition. Telework puts the spotlight on a manager's performance management skills, the ability to manage employees based on clear, measurable goals rather than time and attendance. Effective performance management becomes even more important in a telework environment where good performance management practices and transparency can provide a solid foundation for an effective telework program. A lack of good performance management skills can lead to poor results in any setting, but especially in a telework environment. Before addressing the importance of performance management in a virtual environment, it's important to look at some of the common barriers to implementing telework. In many cases, the biggest barriers to telework are what we call myths, stories based on the fear of the unknown rather than on actual experience. The idea that teleworkers are out of sight, out of mind is one of those myths. The question about teleworker availability is largely about culture, not technology. With modern technology, communication between teleworkers and their coworkers and customers should be seamless at all times. Also, if the agency fosters a telework-friendly culture, employees do not need to worry about losing touch with their bosses and coworkers. Another common myth is that teleworkers get preferential treatment. It's important to remember that telework is not an employee right or entitlement. Teleworkers, like any other employee, are held accountable for their performance and conduct. To make the privilege of telework an effective carrot, managers need clear and enforceable eligibility criteria. To begin with, the Telework Enhancement Act sets out some very basic criteria for determining employee eligibility and participation in telework. These standards include that telework should not diminish employee performance or agency operations. Also, an employee may not be authorized to telework if the performance of that employee does not comply with the terms of the written agreement between the manager and the employee. Additionally, your agency telework policy is also useful since it establishes the basic guidelines for telework eligibility. Within this framework, managers and supervisors generally have discretion to implement telework to fit the business needs of their organizations. Managers are hamstrung by policies that don't allow them to revoke telework privileges even when employees are clearly abusing them. The same rules apply as in the previous slide. Telework is not an employee right or entitlement. Teleworkers, like other employees, are held accountable for their performance and their conduct. If you suspect telework abuse, it's important to document issues and problems and share with the employees involved. Your documented concerns create a clear message to the employee and put them on notice that you are paying attention. It's important to act promptly and decisively to solve problems. If you ignore the problem, it'll usually get worse. Be prepared to enforce the agency telework policy for all employees. It's helpful if you can point to a guideline in the policy or procedures to back up your actions. In cases involving suspected telework abuses, it's important for managers to understand the requirements of the agency telework policy, including the requirements for terminating a telework agreement. If you have questions about those policies or concerns about an employee abusing telework, please consult your agency telework coordinator, HR staff, and others as appropriate. Another myth is that employees who telework are slackers. The notion that teleworkers are slackers is not supported by research. In fact, the most commonly mentioned benefits of telework by senior managers is that it can lead to increases in work efficiency, productivity, and employee morale. Employees who telework report fewer distractions and interruptions, the ability to work at their personal peak times, and less stress due to the absence of a commute. Supervisors report they are better able to monitor the work of teleworkers by shifting the focus from how much work the employee looks like he or she is accomplishing to how much is actually being accomplished. By focusing on the work product instead of the work activity, many supervisors find they are better able to communicate clear expectations to their employees. And when supervisors and teleworkers agree on job expectations, it often leads to increases in employee productivity and job satisfaction. Another myth is negotiating and managing individual telework arrangements takes too much of a manager's time and effort. In most cases, the agency telework policy establishes the basic guidelines for telework eligibility and the application process. Within this framework, managers and supervisors generally have discretion to implement telework to fit the business needs of their organizations. Once the telework arrangement is established, manage all employees the same way. In order to maximize the benefits of telework, managers and employees need to have clear expectations of who is eligible to telework and what activities should be completed while teleworking. Another common myth is that virtual work is harder to manage and oversee. A results-based management, which is a key to virtual work arrangements, frees both managers and employees from micromanagement. Managing employees that work in virtual work environments will require more communication regarding the work product and expectations. The work accomplished, not face time, should be the measure of value. Many managers find that the improved communication with employees reduces their overall workload over time. This leads to more effective supervision and a more productive work environment. Next, we have an employee should be able to perform most or all of the work virtually to be able to telework. While it is true that some jobs don't lend themselves to telework, TSA officers are often used as an example, the reality is that most jobs are really a collection of tasks. Some tasks, especially those involving reading, thinking, planning, analyzing, programming, or making phone calls, can be done anywhere and do not necessarily require any particular type of technology. For some employees, these tasks may take up 10% of their job, for others 90%. For employees whose job functions include 90% of portable work, the decision to allow telework is a much easier call. For those with jobs that don't include a lot of portable tasks, it might require a little creative thinking and problem solving on the part of the manager to accommodate a request to telework. In this instance, you may determine that telework is only appropriate for situational purposes, such as an agency closure due to inclement weather. In this section, we will briefly discuss the importance of effective leadership skills. Good communication and leadership skills is essential for successfully completing work and is especially necessary in a virtual environment. Managers need strong leadership skills to navigate in a virtual environment. Some of those skills include the ability to inspire people. It's important to establish a real connection with each member of your team. Supervisors provide support and reinforce commitment from their team most effectively by providing brief but regular and meaningful communications to discuss priorities and needs. Also, it's important to empower your team. Give employees the support they need when they need it. This includes providing coaching and development to help employees succeed and flourish. It's important to lead change. As a manager, you set the tone for your team, including fostering a telework-friendly culture. And lastly, provide a shared vision to accomplish mission-critical goals. Successful managers navigate within the structures and procedures. That means you should familiarize yourself with your agency's telework policy. The telework policy outlines all of the general requirements that a telework program must work within. Provide clear communications. Every member of your team requires clear and effective communication to accomplish his or her job. Also, it's important to read between the lines. This generally means asking more questions and conversing more frequently. Asking questions is a powerful and often overlooked communications tool. Also recognize that sometimes the most important thing in communication is hearing what is not said. So asking the right types of questions is even more critical. What does that mean? It means asking pointed questions that require employees to elaborate, thus giving you adequate information to assess performance and whether or not employees are meeting work requirements. Managing successfully in a virtual environment is made easier when leaders manage by objectives using effective performance management measures. Effective performance management measures include setting goals and planning the work, measuring progress toward accomplishment of those goals, providing feedback to employees, setting high standards and also developing the skills needed to reach them, using formal and informal rewards to recognize the behavior and results that accomplish agency and mission objectives. OPM is in the process of developing additional training entitled Performance Management Plus, where the focus will be on improving the effectiveness of performance management practices by enhancing employee engagement. Stay tuned for more information about that. In a virtual environment, managers need to define, facilitate, and encourage performance. By define, we mean that all team members must clearly understand their responsibilities. To facilitate performance, managers need to develop specific challenging goals, measures of the extent to which goals have been accomplished, and assessment mechanisms so that workers and managers can stay focused on what really counts. To encourage performance, especially repeated good performance, it is important to provide sufficient rewards that employees really value in a timely and fair manner. When used constructively, a strong performance measurement system is a helpful tool that provides information to managers and employees about how well they're doing in reaching their goals and where they might have room for improvement. The overall objective of goals, measures, and assessment is to leave no doubt in the minds of remote workers what is expected of them, how it will be measured, and where they stand at any given point in time. Each agency plays a vital role in ensuring that managers and supervisors develop good management skills to measure the performance of all employees, including employees in a virtual environment. This includes leadership support of engagement. Success of performance management depends on engagement of supervisors and their employees. A successful agency fosters conditions essential to an engaged workforce to ensure each employee can reach his or her potential to contribute to the success of the agency. Research shows a relationship between employee engagement and performance. It's worth noting that GAO and OPM have identified the following practices as key drivers of engagement. There is overlap between 4 of those concepts in the area of performance feedback, employee training and development, the importance of work-life balance, and communication from management or collaborative management. These drivers, leveraged appropriately, can indicate direction and options for effective change for any organization. When managing teleworkers, it's important to remember to manage all employees the same way. The Telework Enhancement Act includes specific language that says teleworkers and non-teleworkers are treated the same for purposes of periodic appraisals of job, training, rewarding, reassigning, promoting, reducing in grade, retaining and removing employees, work requirements, and other acts involving managerial discretion. We recognize that most managers can improve how they manage performance now. So what is performance management? It's the continuous process of planning, monitoring, developing, rating, and rewarding employee performance. The process also includes involvement of employees in improving organizational effectiveness and accomplishment of agency mission. During the planning stage, planning the work and setting expectations is the first step in managing performance. Next, involve employees in the development and implementation of performance plans. Getting employees involved in the planning process will help them understand the goals of the organization, what needs to be done, and how well it should be done. We know from countless studies that employees feel most empowered and enabled to succeed and grow when supervisors involve them in continuous dialogue on position expectations, alignment of position responsibilities and agency mission, progress toward achieving expectations, and areas of strength or needs for improvement. Next, it's important to communicate expectations and clearly define what the employee is to accomplish. Lastly, identify how results will be measured. Performance elements and standards should be measurable, understandable, equitable, and achievable. Another way of saying this is that objectives and indicators need to be SMART. They should specify clearly what is to be done, when it is to be done, who is to accomplish it, and how much is to be accomplished. They should be measurable. It's important to ask questions such as how much, how many, how will I know when it is accomplished. They should be attainable. Assure there is a reasonable path to achievement and feasible odds that you will get there. They should be realistic. The objective needs to match the level of complexity with the employee's experience and capability, and no insurmountable barriers outside the control of the employee should hinder its accomplishment. And finally, they should be time-bound. Be clear about the time frame for completion. In an effective organization, assignments and projects are monitored continually. To accomplish this, managers and employees should regularly meet to assess progress towards meeting performance objectives. You should identify any barriers. Ongoing monitoring provides the supervisor the opportunity to check how well employees are meeting work objectives and goals, and to make changes as necessary. Provide feedback. Monitoring well means consistently measuring performance and providing ongoing feedback to employees and work groups on their progress towards reaching their goals. Next, identify any changes that may be required to the work plan. Remember that during the monitoring stage, supervisors can identify and address unacceptable performance at any time during the appraisal period. Monitoring performance includes measuring performance and providing feedback. Measuring employee results rather than their activities is more efficient and effective. Remember, monitoring day-to-day performance does not mean micromanaging every aspect of how employees carry out their assigned duties and tasks. Instead, the focus should be on results achieved. Managers should measure quality, quantity, timeliness, and cost-effectiveness. Quality addresses how well the employee or work unit performed the work and/or the accuracy or effectiveness of the final product. Quantity addresses how much work the employee or work group produced. Timeliness addresses how quickly, when, or by what date the employee or work group produced the work. And cost-effectiveness addresses dollar savings or cost control for the government. Effective and timely feedback addressing employee performance is an essential component of a successful performance management program and is vital to the success of the telework arrangement. Performance feedback emphasizes the need for ongoing employee feedback to support and sustain progress toward achieving work goals. Both GAO and OPM include performance feedback as a key driver of employee engagement. Remember to give feedback to a telework or remote worker just as you would with any other employee. There are two types of feedback. The first is positive feedback that recognizes good performance. If an employee reached or exceeded a goal, the sooner he or she receives positive feedback, the more rewarding it is. Positive feedback is a good motivator and encourages employees to maintain high standards. Next is constructive feedback. Providing constructive feedback highlights areas where an employee may need improvement. Feedback, including constructive feedback, works best when it relates to a specific goal. It should be direct and offer examples of where the employee is meeting or failing to meet expectations. Remember, employees should receive information about how well they are doing in as timely a fashion as possible. If they need to improve their performance, the sooner they find out about it, the sooner they can correct the problem. Since people respond to information presented in a positive way, try to express feedback in a manner that will best help employees improve. Feedback should also offer opportunities for employees to ask questions and seek clarification. Development efforts can encourage and strengthen good performance and help employees keep up with changes in the workplace. Training and development is also identified as a key driver of engagement. Training and development focuses on the need to increase employee capacity to perform. It can be accomplished by providing additional training, providing new assignments that introduce new skills and higher levels of responsibility, or by improving work processes. Development encourages and strengthens good performance. Rating means evaluating employee or group performance against the elements and standards in an employee's performance plan, summarizing that performance and assigning a rating. Performance rating emphasizes the role of evaluating employee performance to achieve results. Rating is also important because organizations need to know who their best performers are. Rewarding means recognizing employees individually and as members of groups for their performance and acknowledging their contributions to the agency's mission. In an effective organization, rewards are used often and well. There are many ways to acknowledge good performance, from a sincere thank you for a specific job well done to granting the highest level agency-specific honors and establishing formal cash incentive and recognition award programs. Awards are used to recognize and encourage results and excellence in job performance. In the next section, we will discuss 3 key questions that are often asked by managers of employees in a virtual environment. The first is, what expectations should you have for employees while they telework? How should you determine if employees are meeting expectations? And lastly, how do you provide feedback and keep employees on track? In setting expectations for employees who telework, follow the same approach you would for any other supervisory situation. Remember, under the Telework Enhancement Act, teleworkers and non-teleworkers are treated the same, especially when it comes to work requirements or other acts involving managerial discretion. For example, that means you shouldn't require teleworkers to provide a work report of assignments completed on a telework day if that same requirement is not made of your office staff. When setting expectations, ensure that the performance standards are specific, measurable, understood by you and the employee, and are realistic. How should I determine if employees are meeting expectations? First, performance should be assessed against expectations set forth in the performance plan and telework agreement. It's important to focus on a results-based assessment. It's also important to establish regular discussions to review completed tasks as well as items in progress. Ask specific questions regarding the status of assignments or tasks, then drill down by asking more pointed questions that require employees to elaborate so you have enough information to determine the performance and whether employees are meeting goals. How do you provide feedback and keep teleworking employees on track? Regardless of how work is documented, regular feedback is vital to the success of the telework arrangement. Provide feedback just as you would with any employee. It should be direct and offer examples of where the employee is meeting or failing to meet expectations. It should also give the employee an opportunity to ask questions and seek clarification. The overall objective of goals, measures, and assessment is to leave no doubt in the minds of remote workers what is expected of them, how it will be measured, and where they stand at any given point in time. There should be no surprises in the performance management process, and regular feedback to remote workers help to ensure that there won't be. Problems should be addressed and resolved quickly before they escalate to the detriment of the employee's performance and the telework arrangement. In this section, we will discuss the importance of managing for results and not by observation in a virtual environment. What performance measures work in a virtual environment, and how are they different from in-office face-to-face interactions? In setting expectations for employees who telework, follow the same approach you would in any other supervisory situation. Ensure that the standards are specific, measurable, accepted by you and the employee, and are realistic. Performance should be assessed against the expectations that are set forth in the telework agreement and related work plans. Because telework does not lend itself to in-person observation, supervisors should also focus on a results-based assessment. Managing employees you can't see differs considerably from walking around offices to see that employees are at their desk. For this reason, some managers have to learn new communication skills to ensure that all employees feel like they are part of the larger team. Effective communication skills, both formal and informal, are critical for virtual environments to ensure that remote workers and office staff remain in sync when it comes to work accomplishment. Managers need to delegate effectively and to follow up to ensure that work is accomplished. Learning to make the transition from managing time to managing projects is critical and will determine the success of an organization's telework program. It's important to focus on the outcomes. The work accomplished, not face time, should be the measure of value. This will require identifying and evaluating performance measures to ensure that teleworking employees are achieving the team's goals. Managers must communicate performance standards clearly. Use the standards written in the employee performance plans to communicate expectations. In a virtual environment, regular communication ensures everyone is in sync and teleworkers feel connected to their colleagues and agency projects. Recognizing the value of excellent employee performance is also important. You should be careful to be fair in your distribution of praise and other incentives, keeping track of excellence for all types of jobs, not just those at the highest level. Anticipated positive manager outcomes when effective performance management measures are in place include mission achievement and organizational success, improved service to customers and stakeholders, increased productivity, and a more engaged and productive workforce. You can also anticipate some positive employee outcomes, including confidence in performance, greater understanding of work expectations, more job satisfaction, feelings of empowerment at work, and better work-life balance. Anticipated negative organizational outcomes that result from lack of performance management measures include reduced productivity that can poison office morale, poor work results that can jeopardize support for your telework program, and lack of support for telework on the part of managers and poor performance on the part of your employees. In this next section, we focus on specific manager concerns related to telework. We understand that many managers have legitimate concerns about the widespread adoption of telework related to trust and other issues. A frequent concern about virtual work arrangements is directly related to issues of trust. How do I know my employees are working? If you are setting up regular discussions with your teleworkers to review completed tasks and items in progress, and the employee is meeting those deadlines and turning in assignments on time, then this is a good indication that your employee is working. Performance should be assessed against expectations set forth in the telework agreement and related work plans. Supervisors should also focus on a results-based assessment. If you have concerns about whether the employee is working, again, ask specific questions regarding a particular assignment or task. By asking pointed questions that require the employee to elaborate, you should have adequate information to assess his or her performance. It's important for you to also document performance or conduct concerns and share with the employees involved as you would with a non-telework employee. How do I address technology disconnects and ensure that an employee's home office measures up to the demands of the job? Establishing an effective telework program is not without cost to the agency, particularly in the area of information security. Inadequate resources, inferior hardware and software, or lack of technological know-how can torpedo any telework program. Managers should have an inventory of their agency's information technology assets, as well as access to IT support staff to ensure employees have the technology and equipment support they need to perform their jobs. This includes government-provided or approved portable devices, security software that enables secure and reliable access to their work files from home, and other technological tools that ensure seamless communication with supervisors, coworkers, and customers. With regard to the requirements for a home office, unless an employee teleworks on a more frequent basis, for example, 4 or more days per week, he or she is not likely to need a fully equipped office. Generally, a PC that allows for secure access to office files, internet connectivity, and a home phone or cell phone where office phones can be forwarded should suffice to ensure seamless communication. Managers are forced to be fair and treat all employees the same. Some employees are not suited for telework, but it's an all or none proposition. Contrary to popular belief, the Telework Enhancement Act does not mandate telework. It simply mandates that agencies have a telework policy in place that establishes the parameters and requirements for telework for agency employees. The Act includes specific language that says that telework should not diminish employee performance or agency operations, and an employee may not be authorized to telework if the performance of that employee does not comply with the terms of the written telework agreement. To make the privilege of telework an effective carrot, managers need clear and enforceable eligibility criteria. Apply the rules fairly and consistently. Making transparent and supported decisions about telework eligibility will give employees confidence that you are acting according to agency policies and procedures and are not playing favorites. Lack of face-to-face contact hinders clear communication and team building. In theory, a manager should be able to work with employees equally well, whether they are in the office, on the road, or at an approved alternate work site. All employees, no matter where they work, need measurable and meaningful performance goals. Those measures provide a sound basis for an effective ongoing dialogue about work expectations. Since facial expressions and body language cues are not available in a virtual environment, teleworkers must compensate with other forms of communication in order to understand each other fully. This generally means asking more questions, and conversing more frequently. Regular updates and status quo reports are necessary to replace hallway conversations, networking, and the daily stimulation of a traditional office environment. Also, fostering a telework-friendly culture will ensure that remote workers feel connected to their bosses and their coworkers. Remote workers are sometimes hard to reach and can't keep up with the changing demands and priorities of the office. The question of availability is more about culture rather than technology. Ideally, employees who work at home should not be out of sight, out of mind. If an agency successfully fosters a telework-friendly culture, employees do not need to worry about losing touch with their managers or their coworkers. One possible solution is to establish a telework protocol with your team to ensure that managers and employees have a common understanding of your telework rules of engagement. This means reaching consensus on what teleworking as a team looks like for your organization. For example, what is the appropriate way to reach teleworkers, by telephone, email, or other tools? What is the expected response time if teleworkers are not immediately available? The sooner you identify problems and come up with common goals and protocols, the more effective your working environment is going to be for everyone. Some employees will game the system by performing household chores or running personal errands instead of working. Managers often cite concerns about managing remote workers due to a perceived loss of control over efficient business operations and, in some cases, an outright waste of tax dollars by unsupervised and unmotivated employees. Teleworkers, like other employees, are accountable for both their performance and their conduct. It's important that you document issues and problems and discuss them with the employee involved. Act promptly and decisively to solve problems and consult your telework coordinator and/or HR staff regarding concerns about program abuses. When discussing concerns about conduct, it's important to acknowledge that some employees are better suited for telework than others. However, the solution is not to kill telework altogether, but to use it as leverage and a great performance incentive for employees who want more workplace flexibility and work-life balance. Once an employee is approved for telework, the first step in ensuring performance is to have a good objective set of performance goals and then determine whether or not the employee is meeting those goals. Provide clear instructions and deadlines, interim updates, and regular feedback. Be prepared to enforce your telework policy to all direct reports. Also be able to turn to a guideline in your policy and procedures to back up any actions you take. Work directly with your telework coordinator, HR, and others as appropriate to address program abuses. A rigid bureaucracy around discipline and/or collective bargaining agreements makes it difficult for managers to address telework abuses. Remember, the Telework Enhancement Act includes specific language that speaks to employee eligibility and participation in telework, including language that says that telework should not diminish employee performance or agency operations, and an employee may not participate in telework if they don't comply with the terms of the written telework agreement. To ensure program success, managers should exercise appropriate managerial control over their organization and staff. Again, telework is not an employee right or entitlement. Employees should understand that failure to comply with the terms of the telework agreement, failure to comply with workplace policies or rules, or failure to maintain appropriate performance levels while teleworking may result in suspension or termination of the telework agreement. It's important to document performance or conduct concerns and share with the employees involved as you would with a non-telework employee. Consult your telework coordinator, HR staff, and others as appropriate. How do I know that employees are being responsive to the needs of my team and our customers? It's important to remember that telework days should be just like any other workday in terms of the ability to communicate both internally and externally with team members and customers. To ensure seamless communication, begin with some ground rules so that all team members understand the method of communication with off-site workers and what is expected during those communications. Schedule virtual meetings to ensure open communication. Regular updates and status reports are necessary to replace hallway conversations, networking, and the daily stimulation of a traditional office environment. Finally, don't dismiss comments or complaints from coworkers or customers that a remote worker is not being responsive. Address those complaints the same way you would in any other supervisory situation. When addressing coworker-customer impact, it's important to remember that all team members need to understand their roles and responsibilities. As the manager, it's important for you to maintain a sense of control over your staff, even when people are out of sight. For telework to be successful, your team must trust that their coworkers will fulfill their obligations and behave in a predictable manner. When it comes to the issue of coworker impact in virtual work environments, it's important to understand that non-teleworking employees may also have trust issues that supervisors should consider. First, they want to know that teleworkers will meet their commitments and be accessible. They also want to know that their workload won't increase with some staff teleworking and that assignments that are normally performed in the office will be assigned equally. How do I certify the time and attendance work reports of employees that I can't see? As a basis for approving time and attendance information, supervisors are required to obtain reasonable assurance that employees working at remote sites are working when scheduled and that time and attendance information accurately reflects time worked as well as absences from the scheduled tour of duty. Employees are responsible for accurately reporting time worked, including their telework hours. Accurately tracking telework participation helps your organization and agency monitor and improve your agency telework program. The Telework Enhancement Act requires OPM to report telework eligibility, participation, and frequency, so it's important that managers ensure that employees are meeting this requirement and accurately reporting work hours, including telework. Concerns about employee time and attendance in a virtual work environment is a legitimate concern. However, no employer is capable of monitoring each employee every minute of each workday, whether they work in the office or at an approved alternate location. It is more practical and cost-effective to have a good objective set of performance goals that measure employee output rather than a system that simply tracks an employee's whereabouts and activities. Does that mean that a manager should turn a blind eye to potential abuses or conduct concerns simply because the employee turns in the work assignments on time? The answer is no. All employees are accountable for both their performance and their conduct. Employees are also responsible for and accountable for accurately reporting their hours of work, including telework hours. I should note that the Telework Enhancement Act includes language that says an employee who has been officially disciplined for being absent without permission for more than 5 days in a calendar year is not eligible to telework. OPM defines day as the employee's tour of duty, not increments of minutes or hours of a day. So, if an employee works an 8-hour tour, he or she would need to be absent the full 8 hours before the clock begins to tick towards that 5-day. In cases involving suspected time and attendance abuses, It's important for managers to understand the requirements of the agency telework policy, including the requirements for terminating a telework agreement. If you have questions about those policies or concerns about an employee abusing telework, please consult your agency telework coordinator, HR staff, and others as appropriate. In the next few slides, we'll explore what to do if telework does not work out. Since it's not possible to monitor employees' actions every minute of every day, especially in a virtual environment, when is it appropriate to suspend or terminate an employee's telework agreement? There are 4 broad categories that will assist a manager in determining when it might be appropriate to suspend or terminate a telework agreement. The first is for conduct. If the employee fails to comply with the terms of the telework agreement or your agency telework policy. This may also include failure to abide by the protocols and norms established by your team for telework. Secondly, for performance. The employee's performance falls below fully successful or negatively impacts the performance of the work group. Next, organizational needs. Your agency or your organization determines that telework no longer meets the needs of your organization. And lastly, at the request of the employee. When making the decision to suspend or terminate a telework arrangement, there are a few things to consider. The first is, again, that telework is not an employee right or entitlement. Secondly, it's important to understand that telework in and of itself does not create management problems, but it can certainly highlight existing problems. If you have concerns about an employee's performance or conduct, it's important to be proactive about identifying and addressing the problems so that they don't escalate. It's also important to hold the right employees accountable for their performance and conduct. Don't punish your entire staff for the abuses of a few. As the manager, you must be prepared to enforce your agency telework policy. Having a clear understanding of that policy will help you make informed decisions about ensuring program compliance and success. It helps if you can point to a guideline in the policy and procedures to back up your actions. It's also important to address concerns about program abuses with the appropriate staff, which normally would be your telework coordinator, HR, and others as appropriate. If you ultimately determine that terminating a telework agreement is appropriate, please remember that termination should be based on sound business reasons and performance decisions. It's important to be fair and consistent, making sure that your decisions are transparent and supported by agency policies and rules. Termination should also be in writing and timely. Follow any applicable collective bargaining agreements or your agency grievance procedures. And lastly, be able to demonstrate that telework directly and negatively impacts the employee's performance or the performance of the group. This brings us to the end of the training for today. Some key takeaways include effective performance management in a virtual environment requires strong leadership and management skills to measure employee performance. It also requires constant and ongoing communication. Performance standards that are specific, measurable, easily understood, and realistic. And they should also focus on results. In the end, effective performance management in a virtual environment may require terminating telework agreements when necessary. Before I open up for questions, I do want to say we're a little bit tight for time, so if we are unable to get to all of your questions, I strongly encourage you to submit your questions to teleworkquestion@opm.gov. If we're unable to get to your questions today, we will answer each and every question that comes into that box. And before we do open up I do want to remind you, as I mentioned before, OPM will be developing additional trainings for managers called Performance Management Plus. The Plus is performance management combined with engagement. The focus of that training is based on an understanding that in order to achieve a high performance management culture, the federal government needs to empower and encourage supervisors to engage their employees in all stages and aspects of the performance management process. I can only say stay tuned for additional information about that training, and we're now available for a few questions.
There are currently no questions in the inbox.
Okay. Again, we don't have any questions pending right now. As I mentioned before, if you have questions, please feel free to forward those questions to teleworkquestion@opm.gov. And as I indicated, we will definitely respond to each and every question that comes to us. Thank you again for participating in our two-part series. I hope that this information was informative, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.